No,
Good. How are you?
no. Why my battery keeps throwing me off here. Hello, everybody. How is everybody doing on this lovely day? This is Dee with Unplug Grief Ministries Podcast. And today we have the lovely Autumn Toy. Is that
Holy.
Toy here? And um, you also spoke at the grief conference, right?
I did,
I
yes.
think I think yours was one of them I did attend, or I just missed it. So I would like to be able to hear it when the links go out. So share with us, because I know you've had some grief experience, and so share with us your story, why you do what you do, and what it is that you're doing to help people. And share with us your website, your book if you've written one. And I'm going to keep complimenting you about your bookcase in the back because I like the way you guys created that. So
Great.
I'm
Thank you.
going to try and put myself on mute because I have a bad habit, and I'm going to own it, of interrupting people. Not to be mean, but because you might have said something that I want to put my 2 cents in. So, and you might occasionally hear Lizzie, but I think Lizzie's sleeping really well right now, so she won't put in her input, but you may hear her say something tonight. So I hope and that what you share with us is going to be a blessing. It's going to help us to move forward and help educate us of what life can bring for us when we allow it to, instead of being stuck in that deep dark hole. So the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much. So I live in Eastern Oregon, a pretty rural area, and born and raised around the area. And, I never really experienced grief growing up, to the point that my first real experience with grief, I didn't even recognize it for what it was. And that was after my husband, Joe, and I had one child, and we were trying for our second child, and we had a miscarriage. And then we had a second miscarriage. That second time was twins. And I couldn't sleep and I couldn't eat. And I thought something was wrong with me. It never occurred to me that it was grief. And because the doctors give you statistics, 1 in 4 women has a miscarriage, it's not really a big deal. It's not something to be upset about. I thought something was wrong with me. And so I didn't recognize it as grief, because people sometimes talk about grief and you don't really hear people talk about miscarriage. And so that was kind of the first experience I had. And it was a shock, because what was going on? I had a lot of insomnia. I had a lot of depression. I was really anxious and I didn't know what was happening. And my husband was great and amazing and really supportive, but we didn't talk about it because I still had the mindset that I think a lot of people in our culture have, that if you talk about grief with other people who have experienced it, you're reminding them of their grief. You're bringing them down. And I don't think I even realized at that point that that's not how grief works. You don't really forget about grief. It's always a part of you and you actually want to talk about it. So at that time, I told him I was fine. I told him it was all okay. He could tell it wasn't, but he didn't force the conversation, and I grieved those losses alone. Fast forward a little bit, my husband and I were able to conceive again, and we had another little boy, and it was amazing, and life was perfect, and my husband Joe was taking care of me, and I couldn't have wanted anything more. And then 2 weeks after our second son was born, my husband Joe went for a jog. He was an avid hunter. He was a wildland firefighter. He did Parks and Recs basketball. And he went for a jog pretty late in the evening, and he didn't come home.
Ooh.
And by the time I went to look for him, I figured he must have just hurt an ankle or something. And what I found was him unresponsive on the side of the road. And at 30 years old, his heart stopped.
Do they know what?
No, nope, they don't. He was jogging at night. So of course the first thought was it was a hit and run.
Yes.
That was pretty quickly ruled out, and full autopsy, full reports, DNA reports, and nothing was determined. He's officially unknown natural causes.
Wow.
So
So in a way, in a sense, do you feel like you and your family was taught that grief is something to be ashamed of?
I don't think we were necessarily taught that. I just don't think it was discussed. It just wasn't a thing. And really looking back on it, there wasn't a whole lot of grief that my parents have experienced either. My dad did lose his mom at one point, and I wasn't around when that happened. And I do remember them talking about it when his dad passed away when I was in middle school. But it wasn't, I think they kept it from me a lot. I think I overheard some of the conversations, but it just wasn't something anybody had really had to deal with to the level of becoming a 31-year-old widow with a 3-year-old and a newborn.
Yeah. That's unfortunately our society or the culture, if you like you said, is so uneducated about it that nobody's taught how to properly grieve.
Mm-hmm.
You had a lot of losses in a very short time, losing three children and then your husband. So that you went into that depression, basically.
Yeah.
You went into that depression and a lot fear. Fear is what kept you down.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry to hear that, Autumn, because I, I mean, I feel like at some point I was also like that, and and then not until you actually have those losses do you realize what it really is. But you guys, it sounded like you guys were still ashamed to talk about it.
Yeah. I think we really were. And living in a pretty rural area, of course, the mentality is always, well, suck it up and deal with it. And it's not a big deal. And there's not a lot of support services. And I wasn't looking for him at first because I needed to be strong and I needed to take care of my family. And that's what he would want me to do. And I understand now that everybody just wanted to be really supportive of me and let me know I could do it. But that also worked to tell me that, oh, I don't need to try to find people to talk to. I don't need to try to find a coach or a therapist or other support communities. And it took me a while to realize that that wasn't the case. I did need that support. And really, I needed a place where I could let these walls that I felt I had to carry with me everywhere come down and not have to worry about making people feel uncomfortable when I said my husband died and not worry about their feelings. And so I was after a few months, I did find a really good community for widows called Soaring Spirits. And they have a retreat actually called Camp Widow. And I was able to go and be surrounded for a weekend by 200 to 300 other widows. And I didn't have to wear that mask. And that's when I really realized that it was important to talk about it, even more so because people because people think it is a little bit something to be ashamed of.
It's like grief is a dirty word.
Yeah. Yep.
And instead of because they looked at grief as a dirty word, it's like they build this wall, so now the grief can't teach them. You
Yeah.
that we all live on a daily basis. We live with grief.
Yeah.
It's not death alone.
No.
Broken relationships, divorces, moving, losing a job, so on, so on. But people don't look at that as a grief. They think that's just part of life. Yes, it's part of life, but it's also an emotional loss
Yeah.
and an emotional pain. And like you said, I'm trying to find the right word you said. They're just uneducated about it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that, and we have to blame society for that because we weren't taught properly that grief
Well, and
is.
I like to say that we live in a culture that wants to fix it
Yes,
instead of a culture that embraces it.
Yes.
because
Yes.
you're going to carry your grief with you no matter what you do. It's part of your life. You can't get rid of it. So
Yes.
rather than trying to fix it and say, you shouldn't be crying, it's okay, everything will be fine, it's strong, just embrace it and recognize that some days you're going to have bad days, and that's okay. But
Yeah.
you can also still have really good days. And actually, once you let yourself feel the feelings and have those bad days, you can embrace the good stuff even better.
Yes, exactly. Yes. I'm sorry to hear that. Oh my goodness.
Well,
I think
that
this
was,
is like the third or fourth person I've interviewed that was also part of the conference of hearing that, the loss of a spouse. And it's, uh, oh, I'm speechless. I'm speechless. So go on and, share with us what else you're doing and what you're doing to help. Are you still living in the same community?
I am, yeah.
So
Um,
you are gone from loss to educator.
yes. So now I'm the person people reach out to when somebody needs some sort of grief resource. And I've put myself out there to do that because unfortunately, after my husband passed away, 9 months later, my cousin, who was 34 at the time, passed away from an unknown tumor suddenly. And that was followed about 6 months later by my grandfather passing away of cancer that we all thought was in remission. And I was lucky enough to find somebody who really helped me with my grief and embraced me and my sons and let me talk about my late husband. And we went from him being my grief person, who the one person locally that I felt I could really share my grief with, to a friend, and then to more. And we ended up getting married a few years
Oh,
after my husband passed away, which was amazing because it's, like I said, I've really done what I can to embrace my life. And I think it's important that my kids know who their dad in heaven is and also who their dad now is. So our dining room picture has two separate wedding pictures because that's our life. It's just, it is what it is. So why try to hide it?
mhm.
And um, we had a third child. We had a daughter named Riley Marie, and it was amazing and wonderful. And she really was a huge, I don't want to say improvement, but a huge just blessing to our family. And unfortunately, at 3 months old, she got sick and passed away.
Oh my
So I went from living with very little grief to experiencing a lot of grief of different types in about 5 years.
God.
And she also, we actually didn't know what was wrong with her when she did pass away. She had gone into cardiac arrest and they were able to get her heart going again. Um, and we found out about 2 weeks after she had been declared brain dead that she had infant botulism, which is a really rare thing. And in the US, there's about 250 recognized cases of it a year. And she was the fourth documented death in the last 20 years. And I say documented because they're actually doing a lot of research to see if infant botulism may be responsible for some of the SIDS cases.
Oh, yes.
And we just happened to be in the hospital when she coded, but it was very likely that because she was dehydrated. So nothing big. We thought she had a cold. We went to the hospital because we didn't think she was drinking enough, and she was there when she coded. But a lot of people are just at home, and if we'd just been at home, she would have just passed away in her crib. And it was a completely different grief experience. And one of the things that did help a little bit with that grief was one, my second husband, Kyle, was with me, and we'd already gone through grief together and talked about our grief a lot. So we'd already had that relationship built. But we also decided to donate Riley's organs. So even at 3 months, she was able to donate her heart and her liver and her kidneys. And she saved the lives of two little children and a woman who had grandchildren and children. And so that was one of the things where we thought we were doing it to help other people so they didn't have to experience the loss of a child. And we realized that it was helping us just as much as it was helping them, because it took a loss that you don't understand and you don't know why it happened. And it didn't make it okay, but it made something good come out of something that was bad no matter what.
Yes, because and I'm sure you might have, I don't know, I may be wrong, feel angry that that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And anger is part of the grief process. And one of the things I tell people is that being angry and being angry at God is not a sin. It's what you do with that anger. You can take that anger and hurt someone, or you can take that anger and do what you did. You did something in her memory. So
Mm-hmm.
you turn that anger around and did something in a sense, I know it's going to be hard to say it, joyous.
Yes.
Because you have three people now, right?
Yep.
Well, your daughter is living through them.
Yeah.
You know that she's still there.
Mm-hmm. She is. And it's a pretty amazing thing. We've written letters anonymously to the recipients, and we have gotten a letter back from the kidney recipient. And we haven't gotten a letter back from the heart recipient, but they did the most amazing thing. And they sent us a picture of the little boy who got her heart, along with a video of an echocardiogram of her heart. So we could see her heart beating and hear it uh, 2.5 years after she had passed away.
Oh,
So that was pretty special. I hope eventually they'll feel more comfortable and want to connect more, because I'd love to tell them how much being able to donate helped us as well.
yeah. Helped you through it.
Mhm.
Oh, man. So tell us, do you have a website or have you written a book? Um,
Yeah.
what are you doing now? How did you take your pain and turn it around to do something good?
Well, I am a pretty big believer, since I've had to learn how to deal with all different types of grief, that one of the things that helps me is giving my grief a purpose.
Yes.
And so with that, the first thing I did was I created a website called growingwithgrief.com. And it's always a work in progress because, life. So I don't have as much time to put into it as I can. But finding grief resources when I was in the middle of that initial grief was really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, Growing with Grief, I just post blogs and podcasts and books and organizations all in one place. So somebody can just go and look around. And if they don't see something that really reaches out to them, then they can send me a message and I'll do the research for them and send them a few options that I've been able to find.
Do you also support of organ donations, especially for
Yeah,
children?
I do. And actually, one of my newest projects is going on right now, and we're doing a fundraiser. Um, if you go to Growing with Grief on Facebook, you'll see the fundraiser if anybody wants to help with it. But Donate Life is a big organization in organ donation, and they actually do a float at the Rose Parade, and
Oh,
they honor 42 donors in floragraphs, which are portraits made out of flower materials. And it's pretty expensive to sponsor them, and then we have to get accepted. But I do think that sharing Riley's story would be beneficial to organ donation, because a lot of people don't realize that even an infant at 3 months old could donate. And a
yes.
lot of people also who work in the hospitals don't want to bring it up because it's such a hard thing already.
Yes.
And so I think sharing our story can really help spread that word that it is really helpful to the donors as well. And if you find yourself in such a horrible situation, you might consider it, but also maybe it might encourage other people to become donors themselves and
Yes.
register for that. And so we're hoping that we can raise enough money and get an application in and maybe have Riley accepted so we can promote organ donation that way.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
That would be wonderful.
And the other thing I did is I did write a book after
Yay.
after Riley had passed away. I knew that it helped me to talk about it, as hard as it was. It's hard to look at pictures. It's hard to share the story. But I felt every time I did it, even if I was just bawling the whole time, I felt better.
Yes.
And other people told me that it helped them. So I decided to write my memoir, and it's called Boldly Into the Darkness: Living with Loss, Growing with Grief, and Holding On to Happiness. And the name really comes from what I kind of mentioned earlier, was you really have to embrace your grief. You have to turn and face that darkness in order to find the light on the other side. Because as many horrible things as can happen to people, and as many things as I've lived through, my life's amazing. I've been blessed with children, even if I didn't get to meet them all. And I've been blessed with Riley, even though I only had her for a short time. And I was blessed with Joe. And so, as much as it hurts, and I do have really bad days, there's really good things there. And so I wanted to kind of share my story of my grief journey and some of the lessons I've learned. And so I wrote my memoir, and it's available wherever you get your books, as a paperback or an ebook or an audiobook.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. I like the audio, but I do also like the ebook because then it's right there. But the
Yeah.
thing is, with me, to me, most books are very educational.
Hmm.
And it brings out a lot of things. So my bad habit is if I'm reading an education, grief educational book like yours and some of the others, I have a bad habit of with a highlighter, underline, circling words or phrases, you know, that helps me to remember. And that's what helps build my confidence, my self esteem, and helps me to become a better person, not just a grief educator. So,
Yeah. Well, I don't think that's a bad habit. I think that's the best way to learn. It shows that you're paying attention and you're marking words that are important to you.
yeah, there's one book that I used as a textbook for one of my classes. I don't know how many times I've read the book, but every time I'm now on the new book. It's same book, but now a different book because I had used up all my colors and everything on the original book. So, but every time I go through something, I go through it the first time and I was, oh, this is good. Oh, this is good. Then I go back the second time and, oh, I don't remember this. I got to circle it or highlight it to remember it.
Yeah.
So it
Well,
helps me, especially since I had my stroke. Um, it helps me to put that memory back in there and help me to
yeah.
move forward. But
Well, and I think we're always growing, right? And so,
exactly,
and we're always changing. You're never going to be a stagnant person. Even if you're not trying to grow, your life experiences will change you as a person. So then when you
yes,
read something new, it speaks to you in a different way that it may not have before.
yes, exactly, exactly. You see, you're a good teacher.
Well, I'm
I'm glad
trying.
that you're available to do something for your community there. My cousin Sally lives in Oregon.
Mhm.
My brain just went blank to what city, but it's a common city. It's
There's
not Portland.
Portland or Eugene,
It might be
Bend.
Eugene. Um, but I do have friends that live near Portland as well. Um, that's just not the roll-ups either. But I am so happy for you that you have somehow found that peace that you needed. And it's not to say that doesn't mean you don't continue to grieve the
Mhm.
loss of your children and the loss of your husband, but it gives you the permission to still grieve, to still cry, and it also gives you permission to talk about it because you don't want to be left like you were originally, you know, in that darkness, in that depression and anxiety, because nobody showed you how to grieve or allowed you or even give you permission. But
Yeah.
now that you give yourself permission, you don't need permission from anybody else. You finally got yourself to realize it and you gave yourself permission and you will continue to always. But I, I feel the longer you give yourself permission, the longer it inspires you.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? It
Yes.
inspires you not only with your book, you have a website too, right?
Yep. Growingwithgrief.com.
.com. And then you're teaching, you're being supportive, you're being a blessing. So you took that pain and turned it around to do something good for your community. And I'm glad to hear from you that your community is opening up more towards that and that you're that go to person in a sense. But I hope they, right there and then, they realize that they can be someone's miracle, that they can help make somebody live a better and comforting life. And what really put you into a good spot there is that you are a good comforter. And I'm gonna hear a lot of people are gonna hear me say this. The 7-letter word for encouragement is comfort. So you're going to be a continuing, not just comfort, encourager, uplift, you know,
Well, thank you.
inspire, motivate, you know. Now you
Yeah.
have that little fire flickering, saying, okay, this little light is going to help you shine brighter because now people are recognizing you and what you went through. And that now that, in a sense, you have that support,
Hmm.
but now they realize they also have a support from you. And that's what matters the most. Wow. You want to
Thank
say
you.
anything else since the clock hasn't come on yet?
Oh, I thought we were getting about ready to run out of time.
I haven't gotten the 10-minute notice yet, so
Oh, well, that's great. We should keep
that's a good
going then.
sign, right?
Yeah.
Did you
No,
guys build that bookshelf behind you?
what was that?
Did you guys build that bookshelf behind you?
No, not that one. I've got one in my house that's pretty similar to it though.
Okay.
Um, that has probably more books than I need, but I like to read because that's both where I find my comfort and where I do my learning. So I know when I did grieve my husband, that was the first place I went to look was what books can I find that are going to help me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I,
I think a lot of people. If I don't know if you heard a lot of the people in our global grief conference, many went through the same thing.
mhm,
It's dove into the books,
yeah.
comfort for knowledge to inspire. You know.
Well, and I think it's really about finding what works for you, just because if you like to read, that doesn't mean it's going to be easy to find a book that's going to speak to you. And if you don't like to read, there's other things that'll speak to you. And however you need to grieve is okay.
Here's my 10-minute warning. So, so Autumn, did you have a class or a workshop at the
Yep,
Global Grief Conference?
I did. I did a workshop on the benefits of facing your feelings.
Yes, yes.
So, and I think
But
you did were able to join that
I,
at
I,
least for a little bit.
I know I was in so many. I really wanted to get a taste of what everybody's doing so that I have something to learn for help to help me. But we're building something greater that's going to come on this next year, and I think it's going to be a greater blessing to people worldwide. You know, not
Yeah. And
just
I'm,
our community. And
yeah,
I hope when we are able to do that, that you can be part of that. You know,
I
because
would love to be.
yeah, we're gonna do it live. We don't know yet. We're working on it. We just now joined a new thing, and we're gonna be a part of the Coach Association, National Coach Association, and we're gonna be part of that. And we're still planning on a big. I would like to have it here in Orlando.
Yeah.
Number one, because it's cheaper to fly in Orlando, not LA, not New York.
I
It's expensive.
I
And we
didn't know you were in Orlando. I actually, when I recorded my session, I was there for the Independent Book Publishers Conference because my book was receiving an award. So I did my session in a hotel room in Orlando.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, but it's a tourist city, so everybody's coming to Orlando. So we
Yeah.
might as well, But Tony was saying, how about Jamaica? And I'm like, and then he said, how about Hawaii? And then he says, no, that's going to be too expensive too. So we're playing around with different cities, and we have a date. We just have to have a location.
Yeah. Well, I think it's great. And I think one of the best things that it does is it provides so many opportunities and it was free. So if you didn't like one speaker, you could have switched over to either from the workshops to the speakers or vice versa. And if you couldn't fit it in, there was always somebody going and somebody speaking to something that hopefully could help everybody.
What we're planning to do is a big seminar with everybody, but then we're also planning to do workshops, different workshops. But we're also going to have booths. So, like, if
Yeah.
you have your own organization,
Mhm.
you can purchase a booth and put up all the stuff about your organization, sell your books and stuff like that. So that way, whoever's coming to attend can still have that one-on-one with you. You know,
And
if you're not at
and
hopefully you'll be at your workshop.
yeah. Well, and that's great and super exciting because I know I have, like I explained, I have so many different types of losses. And what I found was a lot of the grief organizations do have conferences, but they're specific to different topics. So one's
Yes,
specific to being widowed and they're specific to child loss. It's like, well, what about everything? Can't we
yes,
just talk about grief in general? And
yes. That's what it's going to be like. It's going to be everything, and then the workshops will separate to what it needs to
yeah,
be. So, but we want to make sure that the main part of it is, we already have a guest. Tony's thinking of a good guy a wonderful friend of his that can be like the main speaker.
great.
So, but we're also gonna have music.
Well,
And
music is
first,
very healing.
the first night we're gonna be there, we're gonna say, "Go play, go
Yeah.
wherever you want, and have fun." So
Hmm.
that's, and we're thinking of also doing a black tie gala as well. So I mean, we have all these brainstorming ideas, and we don't know what's gonna it end up being, but we're gonna decide that we're gonna be doing this next year, and I'm thrilled. We have less than 6 minutes left, but I'm thrilled, Autumn, that the first time I heard that name Autumn was when I was in college back in the early '80s, and this single mom had a little girl named Autumn. And I remember that little girl. She was the most precious little girl. And I never heard the name as a child as Autumn.
Hmm. There's not very many of them.
No, so I'm like, that's such a nice name that they would think of that. I said,
Thank
that
you.
must be that mother's favorite season, you know? But then again, I've heard people's name being Sky too. So,
That's my sister's name.
are you serious?
I am. We always used to joke that my brother's name should have been like Moon, but his name is Josh.
Oh, Josh means God of salvation.
Well, that works then.
Yeah, so your parents must have been like hippies.
A little bit, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Well, because we have less than 5 minutes, I want to just say thank you, Autumn, for being part of the podcast here and sharing your story and why you do what you do because of that experience that you had to unfortunately go through.
Mhm.
But that experience is what made who you are now. That purpose. That sometimes, and I know a lot of people who've lost children, they don't want to hear about, oh, God had a reason. I had, there's
Mhm.
a purpose for it. But it's not until you have that aha moment through your grief do you realize how important that you do have a purpose.
Yeah.
And your purpose, you're working in your community and helping them. And that is a God-given gift to you and your family to be
Yeah.
that blessing. And that's what we need to be thankful for. And I want to, even if I don't know you in person, but I know of you, and even if I don't live in your community, I just want to show gratitude that you found that energy, that purpose, and that peace to do that for you, for your family, for even your second husband. Um, it it brings peace, doesn't it?
It does.
It brings bliss.
Definitely.
And
Yeah.
at least I can see in your eyes and in your smile that it motivates you and inspires you. And we need more people like you to get into our communities and do this. Even if people are afraid of grief, the word grief.
Yeah. And there's a lot of them.
Folks, grief is not a dirty word. grief can be our greatest teacher.
Mhm.
We have to take the blinders off, take the earmuffs off, listen with your ears, but listen also with your eyes. And with your eyes, you will also listen
Mhm.
because you tell by people's body mood and the movement and the tone and everything. And you can see that and hear how. That's how I can tell when I was trying to do one at my church and everybody was running for me. No, no, no. And part of me was laughing because I was saying that person has a lot of grief that's going on and they're afraid to let it out, you know?
Yep.
So, I mean, I wasn't laughing to be mean, but I can tell by their thing. So,
Hmm.
all right. So, Autumn, thank you for being part of our Unplug Grief Ministries podcast. I'm thankful that you were part of this and that you shared your story and your website and your book. I am going to make an effort to get your book, and I want to read it, and I hope others are going to want to read it as well. And I would like to invite you back on probably this fall,
Yeah,
and
it's fitting.
maybe not because now that we know your story, maybe you have something to really share to help teach us. So um, it's a wonderful thing that we all can have something in common to help our community. So I am thankful for that. So thank you everybody for being on Unplug Grief Ministries podcast. You can see us at www.unpluggedgrief.org /podcast. We're also on anchor.fm /unplug hyphen grief. Too many hyphens. And of course we're gonna also be on YouTube as well. And be be happy. Have a good Friday. Have a good, wonderful. Stay safe and stay healthy. And thank you for being part of this exciting grief movement.
Great.
What
Thank
is it?
you.
It's a grief movement.
Absolutely.
Have a wonderful weekend, Autumn.